so planets that could produce life of the sort that we know. We'd like those planets ideally to be going around sun-like stars, but as we heard, there are lots of those out there. 68 was the number that I noted, and that's just the present tally. We can imagine in the future that there will be many, many discovered. There could be millions and millions and millions of Earth-like planets in the Milky Way alone. So there's plenty of real estate on which life as we know it might take up residence or might emerge. But notice the warning at the bottom that habitable does not mean inhabited, and many science journalists and some quite distinguished scientists often conflate the two. They say there are all these habitable planets out there, so we can expect life to be widespread. Well, we can expect life to be widespread if, and only if, the emergence of life from non-life is quite likely. If it's very unlikely, it doesn't matter how many suitable planets are out there. If it's exceedingly unlikely for life to emerge, then we may well still be alone in the universe. So this all hinges on the all-important question of how likely it is that life will begin on an Earth-like planet. Now I'm showing this picture of the more recent Frank Drake. Frank is now in his 80s, but he's still an active SETI astronomer. Seth will talk about him later. And he's standing in front of his eponymous equation. This is the Drake equation, which he wrote down when he started this exercise. And on the left is the number of communicating civilizations that he thinks are out there. And on the right are all the factors that we need to know to be able to estimate that number. The first factor is the rate of star formation in the galaxy. We know that number rather well. It's about 7 per year. The next is the fraction of planets with life. The fraction of stars with planets. We didn't know in 1960 what that number was at all. It could have been exceedingly small. But as you've heard, we now know that that number is rather large. And then the next factor, n sub e, is the number of those planets that are Earth-like. And again, you've heard that a reasonable fraction of the planets out there will be Earth-like. But then we hit the real problem. F sub L, the fraction of Earth-like planets on which life emerges. Frank enthusiastically put in 1, or maybe 1/10 or something like that. And so did Carl Sagan, the charismatic SETI television astronomer. They were both convinced that once you had a planet like Earth, it would almost inevitably give rise to life. Well, is that in fact the case? It's interesting that Charles Darwin himself refused to be drawn on this subject of life's origin. Now, I'll carry on. Now, Darwin, it will be remembered,